you've got to be feeling sick if you're a Georgia fan right now, or even, frankly, even a Notre Dame fan at this point, because Alabama just came out and just crushed Georgia. I know it's 41-24. I shouldn't, maybe crushing is not the right way to say it, but it felt like Alabama really never was going to lose that game at any point in the second half, just based on how dominant they were. Even going into the half, with what they did before halftime, it felt like Alabama was going to win that ball game. And you can look at the numbers. Bryce Young probably secured himself with the Heisman Trophy with this performance. 26 for 44, 421 yards, and 3 touchdowns, no interceptions. He also ran for 40 yards and touchdown. This was a game where John Mechie missed most of the second half with what could be a serious injury. Brian Robinson Jr. was banged up and not playing at his best, and he's an 1,000-yard rusher for them, the latest in a strong line of great Alabama running backs. Even with all this going on, that Alabama offense was still tremendous against a Georgia defense that does not allow points. They just don't. Georgia, throughout their season, now granted, they haven't played a lot of high-powered offenses. If you look at their schedule, you can actually see that. But Georgia, not allowing a lot of points. I'm looking at their schedule right now. Have not allowed more than 20 points in any game this year. The most they've allowed is 17 to Tennessee. Before that, had not allowed more than that. And then just give up 41 to Alabama. Teams they shut out Georgia Tech. They shut out Arkansas, who was ranked at the time. They shut out Vanderbilt. Gave up 3 to Clemson, obviously, in that first game of the season. That was it. 7 to Florida, 13 to Kentucky, 10 to Auburn. And that's it. So this is a very good defense for Georgia. People were talking about this being a historic caliber defense for Georgia. And Bryce Young went out there and just tore them apart. And that was huge for Alabama because they did not look good against Auburn last week. Minus, of course, the last drive of the game of regulation for Bryce Young and overtime. Then Alabama's offense got everything they wanted against Auburn. But prior to that, in the Iron Bowl, they were not getting much at all. And the offensive line was allowing a lot of pressure to that Auburn defensive front. And it was the exact opposite today. Georgia barely touched Bryce Young throughout this game. And they really held them in check. They didn't have to run the ball a lot, frankly. If you're Alabama, you didn't have to run the ball because you were throwing so well. And Jameson Williams got everything he wanted against Georgia. Man, his speed was so freakishly dominant out there. I'm beginning to wonder if he's going to be wide receiver 1 in his upcoming draft class because of how much he's winning, just pure speed. And it's not just that. He's also a very dynamic player. He can cut very well. It's not just pure speed alone. He's a better prospect than Henry Ruggs was. However, you got to watch this guy accelerate. He's erasing angles for safeties and defensive backs and just running right by double coverages. It's crazy to see what he's doing on the football field. And he's going to have to do that probably in the college football playoff if John Mechie's not capable of going, which I don't know if he will be. He had a non-contact injury that looked like it was a knee injury, and that's never a good sign. Hopefully he's all right. But Mechie too, even Mechie through the first half of this game, 6 receptions for 97 yards and a touchdown. He was getting what he wanted too. Jameson Williams finishes the game, 7 receptions, 184 yards, 2 touchdowns, 26.3 yards per reception. He's just been a monster all year long. On the other side, Brock Bowers, of course, was crazy good for Georgia. He's only a freshman, apparently. That's insane. He's gonna be so good in the future. Stetson Bennett, obviously the 2 interceptions. The one was going into scoring positioning against Georgia, which is going to be huge. And one was the pick 6. So both of them came up big, really helped Alabama out there. Potentially looking at maybe a 14-point swing in that situation, which again is huge when this game is 24-41 at the end. I can't put it all on Stetson Bennett. Obviously, he made some bad throws. But really, when you look at what he is, he's kind of physically limited to some extent. He's not going to be able to run all over you like an Emory Jones was at Florida. He's not going to create that kind of dynamic situation where you're terrified of him running. He's not even as good of a runner as Bryce Young is. I don't know. I really don't know. Stetson Bennett to me is kind of like the high floor, low ceiling quarterback. Kind of like an Alex Smith kind of player. Obviously, I'm not saying he's going to be Alex Smith in the NFL. I'm not trying to say that. But I'm trying to say he's on the level of like a game manager. And that was probably disrespectful to Alex Smith to say that, honestly. Because he's better than that. But Bennett, kind of like a game manager. And we saw it just kind of blew up in his face against a really talented Alabama defense. Because everyone's talking about the Georgia defense. Frankly, the Alabama defensive front is also very talented. Lots of mid-round picks in that defense. Lots of round 2, round 3, round 4, round 5 guys are going to come off that defensive front. Josh Jobe and Jordan Battle in the secondary as well are also going to be high draft picks. So Stetson Bennett kind of did what you would expect him to do against this caliber of defense or against this much NFL talent. I'm not shocked by his performance, but I do think I am kind of annoyed as someone who was rooting for Georgia that he did throw those 2 interceptions at crucial moments. People are going to be wondering, it might not be fair to say this, but people are going to be wondering, what if JT Daniels was in the game? Would it have played out differently? And Daniels, of course, did not take a snap in this game. Or not a meaningful snap, at least. I didn't watch all the way to the end. I missed like the final 50 seconds. But Daniels not playing right now. You have to wonder, will he play if Georgia faces Alabama again? Because they could. The way it's working out right now, if Michigan just goes out and blows the doors off Iowa, which they very much could with a strong running game, and some of the explosive plays they showed last week against Ohio State, if Michigan wins by a dominant amount, Michigan's probably going to be number 1 because they were number 4 in the college football playoff rankings last week. Or they were number 2, excuse me. They were number 2, so they're probably going to move up to number 1 with a dominant win. Georgia, who was number 1, will probably fall to 3 or 2, because Bama will probably move up to 2. Georgia will go to 3 just because Bama will have the head-to-head win in such dominant fashion and the SEC conference title. So Georgia will fall all the way to 3. Bama will move to 2, and Cincinnati will stay at 4. Now, Cincy could potentially go to 3 and Georgia to 4, but that really wouldn't make a lot of sense to me because it's kind of disrespectful to Georgia. They've been so dominant up to this point. This is their one bad game of the year. Dropping them that far down would be kind of weird. But I would also not be mad about it because it means you don't have to watch Alabama-Georgia again. Because I really don't want to see that matchup again in the semifinal. I just don't want to. Because it's just, for whatever reason, I'm not a fan of either one of these teams. Maybe that's why. But I don't want to see this matchup again in the semifinal. I just don't. That's the worst possible scenario for me. But I really think it's probably going to happen. It's probably going to be Michigan 1, assuming Michigan wins. Bama 2, Georgia 3, Cincy 4. I would not object to seeing Cincy 3, Georgia 4, but I just don't think that will happen because it will be disrespectful to Georgia considering that situation. Oh, and look at that. Ole Miss agreed to a new contract with Lane Kiffin. Live Adam Schefter tweet. Nice. What else? Alabama's defense was phenomenal. Thought Georgia's offensive line was not that great today. They weren't horrible. They weren't great. On the other side, Alabama's offensive line that had allowed so much pressure against Auburn was fantastic today. Barely allowed any pressure whatsoever. I just want to read off some stats here. I got some numbers pulled up. That's the wrong one. Okay, so Georgia. Defensively, Georgia allowed the second fewest passing yards per game in the nation this year. Right behind Washington. Washington, by the way, has a lot of really good defensive backs. So Georgia allowed 152 passing yards per game this year. And this is all going off the stuff I found on the NCAA's website. So it's not correct. Blame them. But Bryce Young comes out and throws for 421 yards and 3 touchdowns. That's why he's going to win the Heisman. And rushing-wise, Georgia was the 3rd best team in run defense, allowing 78.9 yards per game. Alabama was 4th, allowing 80.6. And Georgia ran for 109, and Alabama ran for 115. So both of them beat those averages. It wasn't really a significant factor to me. The running games for both these teams didn't make a lot of impact. The quarterback's running, frankly, was actually the most impactful part of this whole game. That and maybe a 12-yard run by Kenny McIntosh, I believe is how I say his last name. I'm always listening to it live. I know he's got to mess that up, but outside of that 12-yard run, the longest run by a running back was Samir White getting 9 yards for Georgia. And for Alabama, Brian Robinson Jr. was the long of 15, but he only ran for 55 yards on 16 carries. So overall, the quarterback's running was the most effective running game we saw today. The running backs really weren't involved. And I expect that to continue because these defensive fronts are so dominant, which means it's all on the passing game, which means it's all on Stetson Bennett or JT Daniels, who was benched for Stetson Bennett and has not played a lot this year, and was benched at USC, had to transfer to Georgia, was benched at Georgia, didn't even play at all today when Stetson Bennett was clearly struggling. So I'm not feeling too confident that JT Daniels can come out here and be your answer if you're a Georgia fan. I just want to mention Notre Dame briefly too. Notre Dame kind of is the loser in this grand scenario because now Georgia and Alabama are going to make the conference championship game. Or the college football playoffs, excuse me. And Cincinnati's going to make it because they just blew the doors off Houston in the second half. And that comes down to Michigan. And Michigan loses, Notre Dame's in. But they went from being in a situation where they could have just anyone lose and potentially get in, besides Georgia. Any of the other 3 teams lost, Notre Dame was probably going to get in because Oklahoma State lost. And now they're in a situation where they have to have one specific team lose, or their college football playoff hopes are over. So, kind of stinks to be a Notre Dame fan right now. The next game starting, Michigan's game starting right now, so I'm going to hop off here. But I just want to say, it was so disheartening as a non-Alabama fan, not even like a Georgia fan, just a non-Alabama fan, to see this happen was such a disheartening thing. It wasn't even a good football game in the second half. I just wanted it to be a good game, and unfortunately it wasn't. But great performance by Bryce Young, secure the Heisman, secure a bid for Alabama in the college football playoff. And that's just about it. Talk to you guys later.